Good morning, chickadees. So today we're going to take a look at the end of the American Revolution um, and moving into the new system, the new organization of government that the colonies come up with. So by early summer 1776, events pushed the Continental Congress toward a decision of declaring independence, which you know as the Declaration of Independence, the best breakup letter. Congress appointed a committee to prepare a formal declaration explaining the reasons for the colony's actions. A lawyer, Thomas Jefferson, known for his intelligence and writing skills, is chosen to write this document. Jefferson's Declaration of Independence drew on the concepts of English philosopher John Locke, who said that everyone enjoys natural rights to life, liberty, and property. And Jefferson changes that a little bit to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Also, Jefferson took Locke's ideas when he declared the government derived their just powers from the consent of the government, meaning like from the people. This right of consent gave the people the right to alter or to abolish any government that threatened their unalienable rights. So all of this we did a little bit in the Declaration of Independence walkthrough. I've posted that Zoom meeting. You can take a look at that as well. On the basis of this reasoning, the American colonies declared their independence from Britain, listing, as you saw, a number of grievances and numerous ways in which the British king had violated the unalienable rights of the Americans. The Declaration states that all men are created equal. When this phrase was written, it expressed the common belief that free citizens were politically equal. It did not claim that all people have the same abilities or ought to have the equal wealth. It does not apply to women, Native Americans, and anyone who is Black or Black and enslaved, the men who did not own land. They wouldn't have the ability to vote. A large number of Americans fall under these categories. So Jefferson's words present these ideals that will later allow these groups to challenge what America is named under. In his first draft, Jefferson, who owned about 600 enslaved people himself, included an attack on the cruelty and justice of the slave trade. However, South Carolina and Georgia, the two colonies that depend on slavery, protested, and in order to gain those votes, Jefferson dropped the passage. But keep that in mind, like Jefferson owned a lot of enslaved people. On July 2nd, 1776, the delegates voted unanimously that the American colonies were to be free, and 4th of July, 1776, they adopted the Declaration of Independence.
Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course U.S. History. There are two kinds of revolutions. Those where things do change, and those where things... This guy, right, that all men were created equal when he himself held slaves and had kids with one of them. And even crazier, American colonists often referred to themselves as slaves because they were denied the right to have a vote in Parliament about their taxation. Now, some people recognize that it was a smidge hypocritical to claim to be enslaved by British taxation, while they themselves were actually enslaving people. But very few made the leap to say that liberty should mean freedom for the slaves. One exception was James Otis of Massachusetts, who wrote concerning America's slaves that unless they were free, there could be no liberty. What man is or ever was born free, if every man is not? But most of the founders, including this guy and this guy, were the cream of the colonial elites, and so they held slaves and made arguments against abolition. Like many historians now argue that Jefferson was trying to condemn slavery in the Declaration of Independence, but without slavery, he wouldn't have had his amazing life. I mean, if he'd been working, he couldn't have designed Monticello or stolen all those ideas from John Locke. And speaking of Locke, Locke equated liberty with property, and a revolution based on securing property against tyranny couldn't very well turn around and take slaves who, after all, were considered property. I mean, Jefferson once calculated that his slaves gave him a better financial return than his real estate investments. That being said, there were many and frequent protests against slavery. The most vociferous protesters were often African Americans, and in the northern states at least, their pleas were heard. Between 1777 and 1804, all states north of Maryland got rid of slavery, although most did so at a very slow pace and were careful not to deprive slave owners of the value of their property. Like as late as 1830, there were still about 3,500 slaves in the North, and on the eve of the Civil War, there were still 18 in New Jersey. New Jersey! So the number of free people of color in the U.S. skyrocketed. There were fewer than 10,000 in 1776. By 1810, there were nearly 200,000 free Black Americans. So in the end, real change came, as it usually does, not through a revolutionary event, but through a revolutionary process.
So the Articles of the Confederation are going to be kind of the first rendition of the Constitution. So the Articles of Confederation came from this piece called Unity Through a Republic. 18th century Americans believed that a democracy, or a government directly by the people, placed too much power in the hands of uneducated masses. So the United States was based off of this idea that like the masses aren't educated enough to rule. They called it a mobocracy. They favored a republic, and the difference between a mobocracy, in their words, or a direct democracy, and a republic is that republics have representatives who speak for the greater good of the individuals who they thought were not smart enough, essentially, to rule themselves. So a government which citizens rule through their elected representatives. However, republicanism, the idea that governments should be based on the consent of the people, so not the Republican Party, or what we think of as modern day Republican, but like this idea of republicanism in format of government, meant things, different things to different Americans. For the founders, it was important that new states would retain sovereignty or control over their land. The Revolutionary War was about overthrowing a strong and powerful king who controlled the colonies. Founders were fearful of concentrated power due to past experience with the British. Many Americans agreed. They saw themselves as a citizen of a colony in which they were from. So they were like, I'm an Mainer versus an American. I don't feel like doing that right now. Sorry. So here's the thing. The Articles of the Confederation of the States, they had some ideas that make it so that they're not lasting today, right? And the Constitution is. So the Articles of Confederation is our first try at forming a new government. In 1777, the Articles basically continued the structure and the operation of the government that had been set up by the Second Continental Congress. It created a confederation of league of friendship among the 13 states rather than a strong central government. So it was like, oh, Massachusetts and Maine, when they eventually become their own colonies, like, you guys are just going to get along, right? Instead of being like, hey, there's a parent here, and that's the federal government telling you to get along. Under the Articles, the plan for the central government was simple. It included one legislature. Executive leaders were chosen from the legislature. When the legislature or Congress was not in session, the government would be run by a committee of states made up of one delegate from each state. So there's no federal court system. The Congress has to settle disputes with everyone kind of arguing with each other. Each state had one vote, no matter its size or population. Each state legislator selected its own representatives to Congress, paid them, could recall them at any time. So there are a few weaknesses here. The Congress does not have the power to collect taxes. It could raise money only by borrowing or requesting money from states. Each state had to collect taxes from its citizen by itself. Congress could have very little power there. Congress does not have the power to regulate trade, economic disputes among various states, and difficulty making business arrangements with others. Countries resulted, like, we're just supposed to be friends and trade with Georgia, but like fundamentally the values are different in Georgia and New Hampshire, right? Third, Congress should not force anyone to obey the laws it passes. So there's this whole government that's like, oh, we're going to make these laws. By the way, no enforcement of these laws. So like clearly they're going to fail. Fourth, the laws needed approval of 9 out of the 13 states. Usually delegates from only 9 of the 10 states were in Congress at any time. So like they couldn't pass laws because people literally weren't there. Also, each state only had one single vote. The votes of any 5 of the smaller states could block a measure by 8 of the larger states wanted. In order to change anything, they all had to agree, so the article is never amended. 6, the central government did not have an executive branch, so the Confederate government carried on much of its business in the South, and the North continued on in the front. In the North, the Union government, so like it didn't make a whole lot of difference. So the great example of the Articles of the Confederation just not working is that a lot of the farmers were really struggling during this period. They just had gone through a huge war. And Daniel Shea, a former Revolutionary War soldier from the state of Massachusetts, when Massachusetts passed this massive tax that could only be paid by gold or silver coin, on the eastern part of the state, the western part of the state, where all these hard-hit farmers were living, were like so mad. They pleaded with their legislature to take it back, and they wouldn't. So Daniel Shea and his 1,200 men go and attack the closed courthouses that were taking away farmers' land or imprisoning them for not being able to pay the taxes. Shea and his army saw themselves acting in the spirit of revolution. They marched to the city of Springfield, where guns were stored at an arsenal. The Congress couldn't do anything because they don't have any law enforcement. It had no money to raise an army, to force people to pay the taxes, or to put down rebellions. So finally, the state of Mass had to give up. And the Annapolis Conference was a conference called to discuss how to fix the government to avoid another revolution. Like if that was just one group of farmers, imagine if it was happening in all of your states. All of your states would be just a whole mess. So that's when we get to the Constitutional Convention. The Constitutional Convention is held in 1787. They unanimously elected George Washington as its president. There was a major division between those who wanted to amend the Articles of Confederation and those that wanted to abandon it altogether. Some people were like, that was baloney, let's get rid of it. Almost everyone wanted a strong national government, but not everyone wanted to start from scratch. The delegation was only sent by the states to amend the Articles of Confederation. The delegates who chose to start over from scratch were overstepping their authority, according to the grounds of this. And so two plans arise, and the only man to come up with the real plan was a young intellectual named James Madison, who was 36 years old at the time. The plan was the Virginia Plan, and that became the focus of the convention. Madison would later be called the father of the Constitution, and then there's a second plan called the New Jersey Plan that was to challenge the Virginia Plan. So the Virginia Plan was based off of a strong national legislature, meaning two chambers, so a lower chamber to be chosen by the people and an upper chamber to be chosen by the lower chamber. The legislature would have the power to bar any state laws it found unconstitutional. A strong national executive to be chosen by the national legislature, so this idea of a president is part of the Virginia Plan. A national judiciary to be appointed by the legislature. So the lower chamber of Congress votes would be based on state populations, and the more people in a state, the more legislatures they receive, and so larger states champion the Virginia Plan. The New Jersey Plan was in response to the Virginia Plan and had some different frame of references, particularly focused on one state, one vote, limiting the national government's powers and make state government more powerful. And so as this convention gets into this deadlock between these two, there's this real debate about should representation be based on population, or should they be represented equally, which the New Jersey Plan said, like, oh no, like we're just all equal, right? We're in this friendship thing. And here are some issues that they aren't being addressed. So individual rights haven't really been addressed as they like amend the Articles of Confederation / come up with this new constitution. Slavery, they're just like not talking about, and you're going to take a look at like what people thought about it as an issue in general. And then who would have more rights, big states by population or smaller states all equal. So that's where we're stopping today. Good luck, and let me know if you have any questions.